If you have a small business between 10 and 50 employees, there is a really good chance that you're keeping track of everything in your head. And even if it's not everything, there's a really good chance that a lot of what you do is tracked all in your head, and it's something that you have to relay to your team verbally. You either call them, text them, whatever it is, you have to tell them what your customers want, you have to tell them what your customers are asking for, and then they fulfill on that, and then you take that back and provide it for the customer. And as you grow, you add more employees, more customers, you have more projects, more to-dos. This just becomes impossible. You cannot keep track of everything in your head with thousands or even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers and hundreds of employees, or even 10, 20 employees starts to get a little bit hard to manage. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that you cannot remove yourself from the business. And it's not that you just can't take a vacation or step away for an extended period of time. It's also that your company is essentially worth nothing. Because if the asset that you have essentially doesn't function or doesn't work when you step away from it, it's not worth anything. And you don't have a business, you have a high-paying job. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is to implement a work management tool. And the goal here is to really just map out your process from A to Z, how work happens from the very, very start all the way through to the very, very end. And then we identify which parts you are specifically involved in, and you start removing yourself from those little areas step by step. And not only does this make work function better, it also makes you be able to identify your constraints. You could see things like your metrics. You could see which steps take the most time, what's most time consuming, which parts you should delegate first, and a whole bunch more. And the reason I bring this up is because businesses really grow to their key constraint. So a really simple example of this is if you get 10 leads per month and you can only fulfill on one job per month, it doesn't matter if your leads 10x and you get 100 new leads. If your capacity is only one job per month, then you cannot do anything with those new leads, and fixing that problem with maybe not having enough leads won't grow your business. Your key constraint there is that you cannot fulfill on what your customers are asking for. And that is your key constraint. And a lot of businesses don't know what that is. And the easiest way to figure it out is to implement a work management tool and track your process, track what happens from A to Z. And then you could easily figure out what your actual constraint is. But how do we actually do this? How do we take what we have currently in our minds and currently being done within our businesses, currently done by our team, currently done for our customers, and relay it in a very clean and easy to use tool, but also a way for us to be able to report on and see things in one place. Now, the way that we do this with our clients is using a very simple 3-step process. And to implement this work management tool, it really boils down to having a high-level mapping. So just writing down all the stages of work that you do, going through auditing and refining, and then digitizing. So I'll walk through each of these steps. And I'm actually going to use an example of a cabinetry shop. My dad is a carpenter and he owns a cabinetry business. And I've worked with him for many years, way back when. And I'm going to actually apply this 3-step process into a cabinetry business as an example. So step 1, we're going to do a high-level mapping. And this is just jotting down and organizing every single step of your business. And you could think of this sort of as maybe shifting from team to team. So think of it from like a marketing to sales to delivery to whatever it is for fulfillment, all the way through getting paid, which might be accounting. Sort of think of it as your major points of what you do in your business. So I'll take that cabinetry shop as an example, and all I'm going to do is just start jotting down all of those steps. And we could organize these later, so it's not super important that these are necessarily in order. So I'll add in a new card here, and maybe we're going to have one card for the design of the cabinets, and then we have another card. This is going to be for, let's say this is going to be for actually delivering them, and then we're going to have someone measuring them at the house to make sure that we have the right dimensions before we create them. Then we could add also the fulfillment, actually creating the cabinets and putting them together, assembling. And then we have delivery, we have install, and then maybe we have like a final check or a final, let's just do a final check of the cabinets, making sure everything looks good, finalizing with the customer. Now I'm going to go through and just organize these different steps. So the first thing we'll do is probably have someone measuring, And this is sort of like sales. Someone reaches out and says that, hey, we want cabinets, we're interested. Someone has to go and measure the house. That's step one. We have to go measure the house, meet with the client, see what they want, understand what they are looking for. The next step is to send that over to design. So I'll put that one next. We'll design the cabinets. And then what we have after that is fulfillment, but there's kind of a step before that, maybe customer approval. There we go. And all I'm really doing here is just thinking through what are the steps from someone finds out about what we do all the way through the job is complete. And again, these are more high level. I'm not trying to get too nitty gritty or specific with these. For example, fulfillment has pulling the materials or ordering materials. Then we have to cut the materials. Then we have to assemble everything together. So those are separate different things that can maybe fall under one category of fulfillment. And I'll show you how we can specify these a little bit later for our team to be able to see them, check the boxes off, and make sure that everything gets done in the right order. So just to recap, we started with measuring. We're going to design. Then we get the customer approval. We go to the fulfillment. And then once the fulfillment is done, we make sure that we do the delivery to the house. Then we install. And then we do a final check. And then we are done. And I'll just add one card for done. That way we know everything that is completed is in that column. So that's it. That's exactly how we go through and just kind of jot down everything initially. All the steps of our process is going to look very different for every different company. For us specifically, we have someone who reaches out. We typically take a call where we jump on, do a discovery call, understand what they're looking for. So that's going to be sort of a sales call. Then we have a proposal. Then we have a proposal that's submitted and accepted. Then we actually have the fulfillment work for us as well. And then we typically have some kind of ongoing accountability system. So it's going to look very different for every business, but you know your business very well, and you should be able to kind of just jot these down, organize them in the right way, and have them placed from left to right, left being this is the first step, right being this is completely done. And again, this is a very specific example for cabinets, but a lot of service businesses are like physical brick and mortar businesses that are providing some kind of a service will have very similar flow. Software might be a little bit different. Other business types might be a little bit different, but all you have to do is go from point A to point Z and find out what is in between. All right, so now that we have this, our next step is to audit and refine. And I kind of did this through the process, but let's say I break fulfillment out into a few other blocks. So fulfillment might have order material, and then we might also have cut material, and then we might have assemble, and then we have anything else that goes after that. So fulfillment, I might have, and then I might look at this and say, okay, all this sort of boils into fulfillment where everything is at the shop and getting ready for delivery. And you want to keep these essentially under 10 total statuses. I would say 5 to 6 is the sweet spot. Going up to 10 is totally fine. Maybe if you have 11 or 12, that's okay. I would definitely avoid having, 15 plus. You really want these to be a little bit higher level. And then what you do is sort of organize these under each card. And I'll show you where to place these later in your tool of choice. But for now, what we're doing is just taking a look at this. Oh, that's not what I need. There we go. We're going to assemble the high level status or like different teams that we have for each different job. And then if we have specific things that go under a specific category, we could just list them down below. So these are our major statuses or major phases of our projects. And these are maybe our things that are sort of sub each phase. So fulfillment has ordering material, cutting material, and assembling. Design might have the relaying information to our design team. We might have drawing up designs, first review, second review, and then going to customer approval. So a lot of these can have different sub things. You can add all of those in here and then sort of stack them just like this for later. I'm keeping things very simple and a little bit more high level for now, but you can, kind of go crazy with this and do what you need. Just make sure you're not having too many of these top level statuses. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is a good place to land. Now that we have narrowed and refined everything down, our next step is to digitize this. And there's a few ways you can do this. If you're a service-based company that is maybe a little bit more physical, like a cabinet shop, electrical company, I would suggest Trello. That's probably going to be your best bet for a project management tool or work management tool. If you're in the software space, if you're a digital service company, if you're kind of anything else and you need something a little bit more, I would recommend Jira. Both tools are actually very, very similar and owned by the same company, Atlassian. Trello is very popular for like more physical brick and mortar locations, whereas Jira is a little bit more well suited for those online remote type companies. So I'll pop up in Trello. here's what a completed Trello board might look like. And let's go through and really quickly pull together like a new board that we would start putting together for our new process. All we have to do is hit create, go to create board, and then we're gonna add a board title for, let's say, cabinet process. We click create, and then we start from the ground up. There is literally nothing here. We're gonna start creating things that we're gonna be pulling in as our process. So back in our little whiteboard here, you could do this on paper, by the way, it doesn't really matter. The important part is that we digitize this after we've actually mapped everything out. So the first thing is gonna be measure, then design. So I could go through and literally just type in measure, add list. Then we have design. Then we have, what was after that? Customer approval, then fulfillment, customer approval, and then so on and so forth. So we just go through and create all of these cards. The important thing here is that we're moving from left to right. Left being the first very initial thing that we have, to the right being the very last thing that we have. And then all you have to do, and you could even automate this process, which is really, really cool, is that anytime you have a new lead comes in, let's say you get a phone call, let's say it's a form fill out on your website or an email, that can automatically get added into your measuring task. So let's say, Bob's house. And what we could do in here is when you have this card, you could go in here and you could add more details and descriptions. So you could add a location, you could add where this was submitted from who, more details, including like a phone number, an email for the actual customer. So we could relay and pull all of this information and even automate a lot of it to automatically show up on this measure column. And this makes it super easy because I can just wake up every morning, and if I'm the person that has to go measure, I look at this list and I see the individuals that are in this column, and I could, formulate my day, where I need to go, where I need to be, whose house I need to measure. So once we have everything measured and ready to go, I could add all these details, upload them directly to this task or this card, and then all I have to do is send this over to design. And now you have your design team, and some of these pieces might be you. So you might be doing measuring, designing, and customer approval, especially in a smaller company. That is super common, and that is totally fine. And I'll show you why that's actually beneficial for us here in a little bit. But essentially what we do is we then measure, the measuring team sends this over and hands it off to your design team. Then design, you wake up in the morning as someone who's a designer, you could go through, look at the cards in the status, and easily say, awesome, I see that this is ready for design. I could start designing this and have everything ready to go, communicate with the customer, make sure everything looks good. And then once everything's ready for approval, we send it to customer for customer approval. And that's how essentially we use a board or a process like this within Trello. Jira is going to function a very, very similar way to be able to see what's happening, and each team could go in and see everything that's happening at any given time. And this gives you a few very, very major benefits. One of which is just seeing everything at a glance, right? So if I go back to this kind of a flow, I could see exactly how many houses or leads we have incoming. I could see exactly how many are currently in design. I could see how many are in fulfillment, delivery, etc. And as a business owner, I'm immediately going to be able to tell what is a bottleneck. Because if fulfillment has a stack of 20 plus jobs that we're working on, and everything else only has a couple of cards in that column, I could probably pretty easily tell that fulfillment is going to be our bottleneck, especially if you have a long list of things or leads coming in, and fulfillment is the one that tends to be slowing things down. So it immediately gives you the ability to tell what is your biggest bottleneck. It also gives your team the ability to understand where things are. So if I'm on the install team, I could see how many total projects are in fulfillment, what's being delivered today, what's going to be ready for install in the coming weeks. I could plan out my days, my weeks, upcoming, know which projects I have to have completed. And the really cool thing about tools like Trello, they actually give you the ability to have like a calendar view. So in here, you could jump in and say, for example, back in this board view, maybe I'm going to have a due date of, let's say, Friday. So I'll add this date. And now if I go to the calendar view, I could see Bob's house is due on Friday. And this could be for whatever you want. This could be for delivery. This could be for measuring. You could specify those dates. But this is awesome because you have this actual calendar view of when Bob's house may start and when Bob's house may finish. And you could see these all really easily on one very easy to view way, but also having like multiple ways of referencing this information. So not just on a Kanban board or like a board view, but also on a calendar view or like a list view or a timeline view. Makes it super easy for your team to get at a glance understand where they're at, what's happening, and what they're responsible for. So that's kind of benefit one. You could see what's happening, so can your team. But then what's really cool is you could start removing yourself from different aspects of this process. So let's say that this red disc is going to be the things that you're currently involved with as a business owner. So maybe you're measuring the houses, and then maybe you're doing the customer approvals, and then maybe you're somewhat involved with the fulfillment. Maybe you have a team, but you're also somewhat involved there. And then you have to make sure you're there for the final check. And then maybe you're helping out with the installs here and there with some of your team because your team's not big enough. So now I immediately know as a business owner which parts of the process I am involved in. And I can immediately say, okay, I should probably get out of the install. Our team is probably big enough. Let me make sure that we have someone who's responsible, someone who is available, and can sort of take on the role that I had during the installs, and we remove myself from that part of the process. Now, this will probably take time. You may need to hire people. You may need to automate some things. You may need to, do some things, implement some things in a way, maybe use AI to remove yourself from different aspects of the business. But at least you now know what you're involved in and what you could remove yourself from. So I'd highly recommend going over and adding a dot or something next to those statuses to know which parts of the process you're involved in and which parts you can immediately remove yourself from with the lowest amount of friction. Some of these may take years to remove, which is totally normal, but at least you know, and on the back of your mind, you could plan for these things ahead of time. So once we start to remove ourselves from these different parts of the companies, our company becomes more valuable because we don't actually have to be there, at least not necessarily as long as we had to be there before, as often as we had to be there before for things to function. So if you have your fulfillment done, maybe your customer approvals done, and all you're doing is measuring, you could probably go out and measure, once a month and lay out the work for your team. They do everything else, and maybe you just do the final check. Maybe that's your responsibility here. You're probably going to be working a lot less than someone who's doing the approvals, the fulfillment, the delivery, the install, etc. So the whole goal here is to remove as much as you can from your own plate and focus on higher leverage activities like being able to grow your company and solve your key constraints. That's really the goal here. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention was that a lot of these things do take hiring new people, right? So for example, if you're doing a delivery, you typically need a delivery crew to deliver those cabinets. But there are oftentimes scenarios where you can actually use AI, automation, technology to not need to hire someone, but still remove yourself from key points of the business. Let's take measuring, for example. Maybe you could create a system where somebody uploads the plans of their house, or maybe a builder can upload the schematics of the house that they're building. And you could have a tool that automatically bids those projects. And all you have to do is go in and check to make sure everything looks good, kind of give it your approval, your thumbs up, and the bid automatically goes to the builder. So if you have hundreds or thousands of people requesting cabinets from you, you can create some sort of system to automate that process and maybe not even need to go out and measure physically. Now, with service jobs, especially ones that are sort of brick and mortar, that does get a little bit harder to do. With software companies, there is a ton that can be automated. And especially with AI, there's a ton that we can do to actually remove ourselves from the business and not necessarily need to hire a huge, massive team to fulfill on that work. Now, it is still possible with brick and mortar and service physical presence businesses. Like I said, like the measuring piece can be automated, maybe even the design piece, maybe the approval pieces, maybe the final checks. There obviously will be things that are always still done manually. But even with things like fulfillment, right? You could get ordering material. You could automate that part based on the things that you have coming through your customer approval and design. You can cut the materials with a CNC. That can be automated. And that typically is done from the designs that are drawn out. You give it to the CNC to cut out. Assembly at some point may be automated in the future as well. So a lot of things we could do and get very creative about to actually have the same size team and not necessarily need to hire more people, but be able to fulfill on more work with the current team that we have now. And a big part of what we're doing here with implementing work management tools is that we're actually trying to get more from our current team. We're trying to get more output while having the same exact size team. And the analogy I like to use here is a factory. If you look at two different factories, right? When the assembly line was invented, it took 12 hours to build a car. And when we had the assembly line invented under the same exact sized factory with the same amount of people, that went down to 90 minutes. So that to say that your process that you're using is going to have a major impact on the results that you can deliver. So what this allows us to do with the work management tools that we use, with technology, with AI, with everything else out there, we can essentially make our current team operate more effectively and output more. And that's the goal of what we're trying to build here. And this is really just step one. It's very rudimentary. It's very early stages just to get a really good understanding of what are our bottlenecks, what are our constraints, where should I remove myself from the business first, and then how do I actually do that? I could go into more detail in other videos, but this was really just to go over how we would start ideating and starting to use a work management tool if you haven't used them before, or if you don't really know where to start and where to implement one. And if you want to work with myself and our team to help do this for you, I'd be more than happy to. Feel free to send me a DM here on LinkedIn, and we could jump on a quick call and go over what your business looks like and how we can help.